There was a time when the Vikings ruled over the seas. These fierce warriors would sail their longships across the ocean in search of new lands and treasures. But when they died, their bodies didn't just disappear. Instead, their remains were often lost to flames in gruesome burial rituals that might shock even the most hardened viewers. Join us today as we explore the disturbing truth about how the Vikings disposed of their dead. From human sacrifices to burning alive, these are 10 ways the Vikings lost to flames. Number 10. The Great Ship Burial. Imagine being trapped inside a burning ship with nothing but a small window to escape the suffocating smoke. That was the grim reality for some Vikings who met their end during the 8th to 11th centuries. During this time, the Vikings believed that the afterlife was just an extension of life on Earth, where wealth and power were everything. This belief led to an elaborate and expensive burial ritual for their dead. The body of the deceased person was placed in a large ship along with all of their worldly possessions, including weapons, food, and even livestock. Then the ship was set ablaze and sent out to sea, leaving only the skeleton of the ship and the possessions of the deceased behind. This ritual wasn't just reserved for royalty either. Anyone who could afford it could be buried in a similar manner. And, considering the price tag could reach up to £10,000 in today's money, that's a lot of people. So if you're afraid of fire and claustrophobia, you may not want to sign up for a Viking funeral just yet. Number 9. The Sacrificer. If you thought human sacrifices were reserved for ancient civilizations like the Aztecs, think again. The Vikings also had their own version of blood sacrifice, and it was even more brutal. In some cases, Vikings would sacrifice their own family members to ensure the safe passage of their soul into the afterlife. And no, this wasn't done by a quick and painless method. The victim was usually beaten and tortured before being thrown into a pit or hanged upside down until death. Talk about a horrifying way to go. But it wasn't just humans who were at risk of being sacrificed. Animals were also thrown into the mix to appease the gods. Horses, dogs, and even farm animals were sacrificed alongside their human counterparts in the hopes of ensuring a successful voyage to the afterlife. So if you're sailing with a Viking crew, better watch your back and keep your head close to the ground, because you never know when you might be the next sacrifice. Number 8. The Flayed Alive. Being flayed alive is not something anyone should ever experience. The Vikings believed that in order for a warrior to ascend to Valhalla, they needed to die in battle with honor. But sometimes they took things too far. After capturing an enemy, Vikings would often subject them to a form of torture known as flaying. This involved stripping the victim naked and then beating them with a whip made of leather straps until their skin was torn and bloody. But that wasn't the end of it. To add insult to injury, salt would be rubbed into the open wounds to make the pain even worse. It was truly a gruesome sight to behold, and it was all done in the name of entertainment. As if that wasn't bad enough, the Vikings would often throw the half-dead victims into a fire to burn them alive. Talk about a painful way to meet your demise. Number 7. The Burning Alive. Viking funerals were not for the faint of heart. If you were lucky enough to be cremated, you wouldn't have to worry about being burned alive. Instead, your body would be placed on a pyre and set on fire while you were still alive. The idea was that you would ascend to Valhalla, the home of the gods, where you would live in luxury and eat delicious food and drink mead, a type of honey-based alcohol. But it was a long and painful process. The fire would burn your flesh, and as you cried out in pain, your friends and family would pillage nearby villages for food and drink, partying hard as you slowly roasted. Once your body was completely consumed by the fire, your bones would be gathered and placed in a burial mound or a stone ship. Some historians believe that this practice continued as late as the 18th century in remote areas of Scandinavia. Number 6. The blood eagle. The blood eagle was one of the most feared punishments in Viking culture, and for good reason. This gruesome practice involved cutting open the ribs of a captured warrior and then spreading them apart to form wings. The victim was then sewn up and left to bleed to death, slowly but surely. But that wasn't the end of it. The Vikings believed that the eagle's wings were a symbol of freedom and power, so they would often use them as a decoration. They would hang the wings up in their homes or use them as a banner in battle. Talk about a morbid way to decorate your living space. The blood eagle wasn't just a form of punishment, it was also a way for the Vikings to show dominance over their enemies. By displaying the wings of a captured warrior, they were sending a message to other potential enemies that they weren't afraid to get their hands dirty. So if you were a Viking, better hope you never ended up on the wrong side of a blood eagle. Number 5. The bear pit. If you thought being chased by a bear was scary, imagine being chased by a bear while on fire. That was the terrifying reality for some unfortunate souls who met their end in the Viking Age. During this time, bear baiting was a popular form of entertainment in Viking culture. People would be thrown into a pit with a bear and then set on fire. The bear would growl and snort as it charged towards its prey, and the crowd would cheer it on. To make matters worse, the fire would cause the bear to become even more agitated and dangerous. Talk about a wild ride. The Vikings believed that the bear was a sacred animal, so they would often use its skin as a trophy. They would also use bear fat as a lubricant for their weapons, which made them even more effective in battle. So if you were a Viking, better hope you never found yourself in the bear pit. Number 4. The stakeout. Getting staked out isn't something you want to find yourself doing. It's usually reserved for those who've committed serious crimes, like murder or treason. But in the Viking Age, staking out was used for a much wider variety of reasons. For example, someone could be staked out simply for stealing food or even insulting the wrong person. Talk about a harsh punishment for a petty crime. The Vikings believed that by staking someone out, they were purifying them for the afterlife. They would often stake out criminals alongside a river or a lake, leaving their bodies to be consumed by the water. The Vikings believed that the water would wash away the impurities of the body, making it pure enough to enter the afterlife. So if you found yourself staked out in a Viking village, better hope you had a good relationship with the local river. Number 3. The skull collector. If you thought skulls were creepy, then you definitely hate hanging out with the Vikings. During the Viking Age, it was common for people to wear their enemies' skulls as a necklace or a bracelet. They believed that by doing so, they absorbed the strength and power of their enemies. Talk about a macabre fashion statement. But the Vikings didn't just wear the skulls for decoration. They also used them as a way to intimidate their enemies. By displaying the skulls of their defeated opponents, they were sending a message that they weren't afraid to take on anyone, no matter how powerful. So, if you were a Viking, better hope you never ended up on the wrong end of a skull necklace. Number 2. The hanging. We've all been to a playground and swung on a tire swing, but have you ever seen a Viking tire swing? Probably not, because their version was much more sinister. During the Viking Age, it was common for people to be hanged on a tire swing as a form of punishment or execution. The Vikings believed that hanging was a quick and painless way to die, but in reality, it was a slow and agonizing process. The rope would dig into the neck, cutting off the blood supply to the brain, and the person would slowly strangle to death. But that wasn't the only way the Vikings used hanging. They also used it as a form of torture. They would hang people upside down or suspend them from a tree and leave them there for days, sometimes even weeks. Talk about a terrifying way to spend your vacation. Number 1, the fire saw. The fire saw is a lesser known but equally gruesome part of Viking history. This involved sawing through the bones of a dead body while it was still on fire. The Vikings believed that by doing this, they were releasing the soul of the dead person, but it was definitely a painful process. The saw would create sparks that flew directly into the open wounds of the deceased, causing them to burn even more. Not only that, but the smoke from the fire would fill the air, making it difficult for the person performing the fire saw to breathe. Despite the danger, the fire saw was considered a necessary evil by the Vikings. They believed that by cutting through the bones, they were helping the soul move on to the afterlife. So if you're afraid of fire and sharp objects, you might want to steer clear of this one. Which of these customs did you find the most interesting? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. Until next time, goodbye.